last minute 2:30 chiropractic appointment, so hopefully she's okay and she'll get here when she gets here. I think we have everybody, right, Jill? Okay, so I'm going to call the regular work session for April 21st to order for the city of Sierra Vista. And the first thing, of course, is the agenda for the 3 April 2020 meeting. And of course, we'll go through the roll call, call over roll call, invocation, pledge, acceptance of the agenda, awards and presentations. I will do a presentation from the desk on our Fair Housing Month. It's that normal time of year where we do the fair housing support, and that's the resolution later. Then we'll have a public hearing on the consideration of drafts, a program for the 2020 Community Development Block Grant. And this is specifically for the one we've discussed already. And we're going to have another discussion later in this meeting about the COVID-19 additional money we get. So at this time, item, get the right thing here. Item 2 should be Mr. McLaughlin. Are you with us, Matt?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Now then we'll go to, we're going to go ahead and go, if Matt's not ready yet, we're going to go to resolution 3, which is the transfer license. Ms. Adams?
Mayor Mueller, members of council, the application before you is the standard transfer of a bar.
Can't hear you. Can't hear.
Southwest Hospitality Services, which is an event venue over on Wilcox. It is a full bar liquor license, but he has informed us he intends to use this license only for special events at this time. The normal process of posting the public hearing was done and no comments have been received from the public, pro or con. The police department has done their background check and has no opposition to this application moving forward. If approved Thursday night, it will be returned to the State Liquor Board for final consideration.
Any questions for Mrs. Adams?
What's the facility again?
It's the 123 events or something like that.
161.
161.
161.
Yeah,
That would
got
make sense. That's her address.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody
Thank you.
else?
Mayor,
Ma'am?
did you intend to be off camera?
No, I shouldn't be off camera, I don't think.
I don't see you.
I probably broke it. Hold tight. There, am I back on?
Yes, you are.
Yes, we see you.
Sorry for that, guys. Sorry for being out and sorry for being back on.
Look, you got the memo, light blue.
Yeah, okay, we go to, next item is item number 4. And it's approval of the regular city council meeting minutes for April 9th, 2020. Any additions, corrections, comments, discussion on the minutes for 9th April?
No, nothing from me.
Okay, I'm hearing nothing, so I'm assuming I'm gonna go to item number 5. And this is the housing resolution, the fair housing resolution that I mentioned before. Is Matt available to do this, or who is going to do this?
I do not see him.
Okay, so Matt's not on yet, but I will tell you, hopefully you've read this. This is just the annual statement we vote on as council, saying we support the fair housing requirements of the federal government within the Sierra Vista city. Of course, that makes it eligible for some funding.
Can I ask a question?
Ma'am.
I didn't see mentioned in there the eliminate housing discrimination against those returning to society. Does it not define?
Is that a requirement?
I don't think
Where's
so.
Matt's
But
not here to answer that question?
Good catch, Sarah.
wondering.
Okay, so state the question again.
I will save it.
Sarah, would you state the question again, please?
It was a question of whether this statement of, was it commitment to fair housing applied to eliminating housing discrimination against those returning to society.
Okay. Okay, so we need to make sure that if it's required, it's in there.
I don't know that it's required. It's something that's been brought to my attention in the past, and I just it triggered that memory of having that discussion, and so I thought I would ask.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
and that sounds like something we even if it isn't required, we might want to consider adding it to.
Exactly. That's why I'm going through this real quickly, because that's something we may want to add. Let's see.
I didn't see any verbiage in there.
Other related transactions based on color, race, national origin, religion, sex, familiar status, including children, a pregnant woman, and people securing custody of children under age and disability. So we would put that in returning to
Looks
society.
like we have Matt now.
Matt, are you there?
Trying to unmute him. There we go.
Matt, you with us?
Yes, I am. Good
Okay,
afternoon.
we're on the fair housing statement.
Okay.
And although I think it's probably not required in our statement on the last page, first paragraph at the top, it goes through the national origin, religion, sex, family, can't even say it, familial status, etc.
Right.
And are we required to put those that are returning to society, meaning the folks that just got out of prison?
I don't think that's specifically spelled out in the act.
Okay. So then the question becomes to the council, we need to put verbiage in there, and I'm looking for a consensus here. I think we got two. I think we got two that already are for it. How about I need to hear from everybody else?
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
Guess that's the consensus. I was gonna say, I'm looking it up right now because I have, for me, and maybe this is my former prosecutor in me,
Okay.
some concerns about forcing people to allow those in housing for, let's say, violent crimes or things like that.
The argument is generally around that two things. First of all, persons have already paid their dues by having served their prison terms. Secondly, there might be some more discussion around sex offenders and where do they fit into the fair housing? And can owners discriminate for any reason around returning from prison?
I understand what you're saying, Gwen, and I'm also saying, as somebody who actually also rents houses, I do have a couple rentals. I do have concerns about that. However, I'm apparently in the minority, and that's okay.
No, I think we should hear what you have to say.
I think I said what I had to say. I don't really have anything more to say about that.
Well, I think Gwen, you make a good point about the folks that are convicted of sexual molestation. They do have more restrictions on than somebody else who's just come out of prison already.
Mayor, could we have a presentation on this particular issue from folks who, I don't know, have some sense of the law around that? Unless Matt wants to say more about it, maybe we could get some kind of
Matt, do
presentation.
you have anything to say?
Nothing other than the resolution we're presenting is the same resolution that's been passed in prior years. And if you're looking to make amendments to include another category, that's something we can add to our memo in terms of background and information.
Well, here's what I would suggest. We have 2 days. What I would suggest is we go ahead and do the declaration as it is now. And then we need to have a work session where we get, as Gwen suggested, somebody who's an expert in this and basically talk to us about it, and we can debate whether or not, because I'm quite frankly on the fence right now, based on based on,
And I'm not qualified to be an expert, but we can
Exactly.
certainly find somebody within the community that advocates on this issue that can speak before council.
Doesn't,
Make that recommendation, Mayor.
Again? That's a recommendation on how to proceed.
Okay, can I just,
Sarah?
just say that I heard this from the Cochise County Reentry Coalition was.
I'm not surprised.
I know, similar to like the Ban the Box campaign of where there's a box of have you been convicted of a felony or have you spent time in prison? And if they check it, they just say
On
no,
the
you
employment
can't
application,
here.
yeah.
So something like we're giving them the opportunity to explain themselves. So it's not saying everyone who's ever been in prison you can rent here. It's not allowing the discrimination just based on them having been in prison. Like it could have been 10, 15 years ago. It could have been for way in the past, something like that. So, and I know that there's already legislation, there's already examples of cities who've done it. So it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel.
Well, what I'm suggesting is we go ahead and do the current one for this year, and we discuss this, and we get the information from the other cities. We get the information to make sure the verbiage is okay, and we can all agree with that, have a further discussion on this. I don't know how many people are prepared today to discuss this in depth and to make a decision today.
Not today, but maybe for another time. Yeah. Thank you.
So,
I'm with you on that.
okay, you're with me? Anybody else? Okay, so Matt, you got some work for you,
Yes, sir.
and I'm sure the city manager will give you his guidance. Chuck, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is really a question more for Matt, and it has to do with how the resolution is worded and whether or not there is any HUD guidance in terms of what has to be in the resolution. And if we have discretion to add categories to it.
Well, I believe the resolution's modeled after the protected classes specified in the Civil Rights Act in 1968. Whether we want to broaden it out to include another category that we would like to see protected, maybe not on a legal basis, but on a preferred status basis. I don't know that HUD would object. That's something I can reach out to them to see.
Matt, what I understand is this is basically the minimum acceptable language. And,
Right.
and really Chuck's question is, would it be an issue if we added, I don't know whether this is more restrictive or less restrictive language, but additional language to the Fair Housing Act proclamation, since it is our proclamation and the base of our proclamation still supports what HUD wants.
Maybe a separate whereas clause, Mayor. Let me ponder that a little bit before I, answer more definitively.
So what I'm suggesting then on Thursday, we go ahead and leave this on the agenda. We knock it out. We have a future discussion as for next year's fair housing statement from the city. See if we add or special language. We can do the research in between, and we can get. I'm not sure we need the reentry coalition to come talk to us, but I think we all understand the issue that there is discrimination that goes on with people that have paid their debts to society. I think we're all pretty clear on that. It's how we deal with it.
Essentially, it's not even a law or anything. It's just showing that we as a city feel this way. Should we decide to do that?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's a statement from council.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion? Matt, we're going to go back to the item of the day. Item number 2, consideration of draft program for year 2020 Community Development Block Grant Program, the annual action plan. As I told the council, you weren't on yet.
Okay.
This is the basic regular routine annual development block grant.
Yes.
And we're later on in the program today, we'll get into the discussion of the additional 160,000.
Yep.
Well, it's 160,000 that we're getting from the feds.
Correct.
Okay?
Do you want me to expound on that, or are we good?
I want you to start your presentation.
Okay, sure. We're going to be holding a virtual public hearing on Thursday for the public to weigh in and comment on our draft action plan.
Wrong issue, Matt. We're on item number 2, Community Development Block Grant, the current block grant.
Right. So on Thursday, we are going to be presenting the draft 2020 program year annual action plan, which is our regular.
Sorry.
Am I on the right item?
You are. I wasn't.
Okay. All right. So this is a 2020 annual action plan for our regular allocation in the amount of $271,810 that is under consideration based on the guidance we received at your March 12th meeting. We're proposing to allocate the entire allotment towards the final phase of the Eddie Sear Park Master Plan. You'll remember no applications were received this year for public services. We're in the second year of the 5-year consolidated plan period, carrying out the public infrastructure and public facility projects in the low to moderate income target areas was rated as a top priority in the plan and where 2/3 of the program funds would be allocated. In terms of process, with your concurrence, we'll make the draft annual action plan available for public comment through May 11th. And we'll bring that plan back to you with any input that we receive for final consideration at your regular meeting on May 14th. The final plan, which is essentially our application to HUD, will be uploaded into the federal IDIS system. And then from there, HUD will have 60 days to review and approve. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions, discussion.
Matt, on Thursday, what time is this, the virtual forum happening?
The council meeting.
At the council meeting.
Okay. Why didn't you just say council meeting? Thank you.
Remind me, am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
Remind me if this is just for the next 3 years or what?
It's next year's allotment.
Last year, you adopted a 5-year consolidated plan last year. We're in the second year of that 5-year plan.
And so HUD has to approve it every year?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can we make changes in it from year to year?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all for now. I have no changes, but I was thinking for next year, we might want to adjust a few things.
Sure.
I think that's the whole idea, Gwen. We put a 5-year plan and basically we adapt and change it every year based on the situation.
Okay.
Plan of execution, we still have to go through an annual public hearing and all the other stuff, just like we did this year for those items. So it's an evolving thing. And Matt, when we hit year number 5, does that count as year number 1 on the next 5-year plan, or do we have to start a complete new 5-year plan? That's my question.
For our 5-year plan runs from program year 19 to 2023.
Okay.
So for program year 2024, that will be the first year of the next 5 years consolidated plan.
It doesn't cascade is what I was trying to ask. So that really you have you have the last year that you still are spending money on, you have the next year that you're planning for.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of cascades through.
Right.
And I'm not sure why they did that other than to follow what transportation does with their 5-year plans. But I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. But anyway, we'll play their game as long as they're giving us money, I guess. Anybody else? Going once?
I have a question.
Ma'am.
Okay, so I was confused on this item because it stated at the beginning, it said that the public hearing was Thursday, April 9th. And
Should have been.
it should have been it. Okay. And so I was just confused by that. And so we are holding a separate hearing on the money that the extra funding for the CARES Act is going to be separate now because originally
We're gonna discuss that as another item on today's agenda.
okay.
2 weeks ago, we were unsure whether that CARES Act supplemental funding needed to be addressed as part of our 2020 action plan, but the guidance that we subsequently received said it is addressed through the currently adopted annual action plan, which is our 2019 plan. So when we get to that item, I'll explain the process.
Okay.
That's item D, in case you're wondering. Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so we're gonna go on to B, strategic plan update. I believe, Madam Assistant City Manager, you're up. Wait. She's got to give you the go.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is your 6-month update on your 2020-2021 strategic plan. And so far you have one initiative that's been completed, and that was the designation of the West End Entertainment District, which happened earlier this spring. Many initiatives are on schedule as expected, and we do have a few on hold, mainly due to the current pandemic situation. I will hit the highlights on a few of the on schedule and on hold items, and then staff are available for questions at any time.
Hey, Victoria, I'm sorry. This is Christine. Can I interrupt you just real quick? I think you've got a bunch of mics on over there. If you can ask everybody to kind of mute, because we're getting a really bad echo. Because I think it's picking up your voice from you speaking, and it's picking it up on the other devices as well.
Are you muted, check? Well, yeah, the challenge that I have, we got to get the mute pushed by the clerk here.
Still hunting to mute check.
Rare opportunity.
I'm hearing Victoria's lovely voice again.
Yeah, I don't.
We're almost there, but thanks for pointing it out, Christine.
Why don't you go ahead and start and she'll get it fixed.
Okay, so the project's on schedule. On item 1.1B, which is your engagement and online tools, the staff economic development team evaluated multiple online engagement tools for better action with the public. And the team selected a platform called Bang the Table. Bang the Table is going to allow staff to post multiple projects and ideas that can receive public comments, votes, and host surveys. We hope to be able to share a demo in the next few months. I listed this one as on schedule because substantial progress has been made, but we're delaying launch for a few months with everything going on. And just for reference, I did go through and renumber all of your initiatives in the plan to make it easier to refer to, say, initiative 5.4 or 2.2. Now they're all numbered in order for easy reference. So on item 1.2, which is the census item, since the census stops for no virus, efforts have been made to promote the census have been continued as planned, except for cancellation of all in-person events, and a great emphasis placed on digital promotion. Once the reminder phase is entered into in May and June, digital promotions will target areas of low response. And as of the county's newsletter that came out this morning, Sierra Vista's response rate was reported by the county at 54.2%, and Arizona's overall response rate was 48.4%. Item number 4, which is on reducing response times. The EMS substation is progressing well. And last week, I'm happy to report that staff finished the request to the Bureau of Land Management for a change of use of the property at the corner of Buffalo Soldier Trail and 7th Street, and it was sent in. Now we wait, but as soon as we receive what we expect to be a favorable response, staff will be able to move forward with construction planning. And that project is included in your capital budget for next year. Item 5.4, which is the funding and design of the Avenida Escuela Bridge. That project is also proceeding as planned. And the hydrology study, which we expect to show that a smaller culvert for the bridge is needed, and therefore a much lower cost to construct, has been completed, and that report sent into FEMA. So now FEMA will review that data, and if they agree with the data, they will update their floodplain mapping for the area. And as you can expect, that might take a while. And so this project is also included in the capital budget proposed for next year. The counterpart to that project is working with Walmart, who funds half the bridge. So we are working on a contact with Walmart. For goal 8.1 regarding defining the scope of homelessness in the community, staff assisted with the point in time count in January and expect those results to be shared in June. Those findings will be shared with council at a work session. Also, the Community Development Department will be hosting an intern this summer who will be working with the continuum of care on a gap analysis. So while there are a number of initiatives on hold, many of them have still made progress and are waiting for some situational circumstances to resolve, mostly due to the pandemic. The ones I particularly want to share that fall into that category are the Fry North Garden redevelopment project and working with the school district on a potential land purchase. Both were on track and progressing at the end of March, and Chuck and I were scheduled to attend the governing board meeting on March 24th to discuss the potential land purchase, but both of these items were unfortunately put on hold when public meetings were canceled. But it's our hope that those begin moving again in May and progress once again. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the plan. And again, the objective leaders are also present on the phone for any additional questions.
Questions for the Assistant City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple questions. My first question is, I know, Victoria, you said you were going to send us a demo in a couple months on bank table. I actually went to the website and they have a 4-minute demo. Is it possible to just send us that? I actually tried to look at it, but they wanted me to input all my information and all that, and that's just not going.
Councilmember Wolf, I don't see why we couldn't do that. So let me talk to Judy and get that out to council.
Thank you. And then I'm looking at also item 5.1, which is on hold. It's the Fry Boulevard and North Garden Avenue Improvement Project. I'm glad to see that we have tentatively received an extension, but I actually had somebody asking me about this just yesterday. When are we actually expecting construction to start and then say finish?
So with the current delay in presenting the options to council for your selection and approval, it pushes the design timeline back by the amount of time that the decision is delayed. So originally the design would have completed in December 2020 and construction would have started in spring 21. So hopefully this only delays the project by a month or two. And we would be looking at construction then in later spring or summer 2021. So whenever that decision can be made, we'll push back the construction deadline by about those many months.
Awesome, thank you. And then I have one more, and this is really more of a statement. And this is in reference to item 6.1, which is about the West End redevelopment, the West Sierra Vista Partnership Program. I think it is awesome that we are actually reaching out to our businesses and taking advantage of this. And I read that. I actually, when I was preparing, I actually called my husband because I was so excited. And I said, I just have to read this to you. So kudos.
I will share with you that I think Tony and
Matt,
Mike and Matt have done a good job on doing this, and I agree with Christine. I do want to go back one though, Christine, on the Fry Boulevard. We're going to try in 3 weeks, knock on wood, to actually have a presentation in the council chamber with the whole full blown, so we can discuss that and pick an option. because we've already delayed it 2 months essentially. And I don't think we want to delay it anymore, do we? So it may be a meeting where we ask everybody to come, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that want to stay home, and that's fine. But again, it needs to be a full plate presentation with the folks that did the consultation.
Perfect. That's great.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Anybody else? You gonna turn it over to me, or you guys got something else?
I have some.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's see, section by section. In Engage, I had a couple of comments. First on
The paragraph, please.
the paragraph, let me go back. It's on the first page, so I'll go.
1.1 or 1.2?
It is 1.1.
Okay.
Very first. On ADA compatibility, and this is just a comment that I know because I attended the Commission with Disabilities discussion about wanting to have accessibility on our website. And I have been in charge of doing that for companies before. So do we offer technical assistance? Because in my professional experience, when we had people struggling with the website, when their reader or whatever program they were using to evaluate the website was struggling, sometimes there was some user error or the two programs were not talking to each other correctly. So if we offer that somehow or make that really, really obvious of how people get that kind of help. That's all.
Do we offer that service? That's the first question.
I'd have to ask Jill or Judy to answer that.
Okay, because I have some questions on this too, and they deal with service as well. I know we have some people that have hearing issues. We have other issues with sight issues. And the question is, do we have the ability during a council meeting or a public hearing, more importantly, to make sure that we've overcome those electronically and we can participate, or the people that are disabled can participate with us? Have we looked at that?
Mayor Mueller, members of council, we are in the process of negotiating and checking with vendors on the new broadcast system, which one of the requirements that we have put into the request is that the system be ADA compliant. So we're looking at captioning, we're looking at all of that kind of stuff. We do have hearing assistant items here in the council chambers. And we're also looking at possibly stationing some laptops here in the station so that people could look at closed captioning if they're not able to employ the devices to help them hear.
And that's really, I think, the first step. And then we also need to look at, are there needs at the commission meetings? Now, I'm not sure how with the various locations and times, et cetera, how we work all that out. But we need to at least consider that.
And that would be problematic. And the first thing is a request. And once we have a request, then we can actually address them.
You're talking about from the public?
Correct. Or a commission member.
Or a commission member. Okay.
The feedback has to come from the person having the issue. So still on number or section engage, just to follow up on Christine's, I had wrote a note that I wanted to see the demo for Bang the Table too. So
okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. And good job on the census, because I think that the city's knocking it out of the park as far as census communication and that goal is concerned.
We need to keep pushing it though. Keep pushing it.
Keep pushing it, keep working on it, but I think they're doing a great job, and I wanted to say that. I'm excited for the podcast and what that is going to entail, and I would love to see the Uber Media report. Can council have access to the Uber Media report that was done?
I'll check with Judy on that one as well.
Okay.
And while we're talking about Bang the Table, let me jump on the table too. Under 2.1, it says it's on schedule. I'm a little perplexed on the first sentence. In addition to the subscription of Bangor Table Community Engagement Platform, staff continue to work on getting a podcast studio. Unfortunately, some of the final equipment needed was considered non-essential by the shipper, and the shipment has been delayed. The question I have is, what authority does the shipper have to say it's not essential? Because in a situation like this, we still need to communicate with the public even more than we do in a normal situation. So I'll just share that comment with the staff, and hopefully the shipment is on its way. But if we need to call the shipper and say, what the hell are you talking about? Essential. This is a requirement by law for us to be able to have public meetings. And this equipment is essential to that. So he needs to understand what the essential means for us, not just for him. Okay. Box. Sarah, anything else?
The only other thing on Engage was it said it was delayed for measuring positive feedback for the goal 3, measuring 1,000 positive social media feedback, and the choices were just under events, parks and rec, and library are the only things that we're measuring for positive social media feedback. And I would venture to say that there's a lot more positive social media commentary out there about Sierra Vista than just related to parks and the library and events.
Amen.
So I would just say that a lot more positive out there to be measured, and on that note.
Okay.
Under enhance, do we have a timeline for when we'll see the site plan for the additional fire station?
Site plan for the initial fire station.
Councilmember Pacheco, the site plan is finished. It is a preliminary site plan that just shows the layout of the buildings and the driveway and so on, which was done to the specifications of how much needed to be shown to BLM. So if council would like to see that, we are happy to share it with you. Or if you're thinking of something more developed in terms of what the building looks like or so on, that comes after we get approval to move forward and then actually have the facility designed.
Okay. Oh, this was something I had not heard of and was excited about under Enhance. Really excited to see that we're accepting joint service transcripts for police recruit. That was really, really exciting. And have we hired anybody using that new method of recruiting for police officers, or is that still kind of in the works?
I believe Chief Thrasher's on the line and can answer that.
Yes, this is Chief Thrasher. We have had several applicants that we have used the joint services transcripts at a portion of their college transcripts. So that is ongoing. We have had a few people get through that process.
Awesome. Okay, I was really excited about that. I guess I missed that this was a goal before about addressing stormwater needs in the West End. That's a huge issue in the West End. So, I mean, under Enhance, I don't know if we had any, is that going to be like presented in the budget, or where we're going to learn more about?
Chuck.
And further, Councilmember Pacheco, in the budget, there's going to be
a line item for the overall surface water for the city. It was started by staff, and with Mr. Humphreys retiring, we're going to have to hire a consultant to complete that. It will include the West End and hopefully the improvements that were made in Timothy Lane, and then the ones we envisioned for the West Fry project will also be helpful in terms of flooding the West End. So it will be addressed.
And Sarah, thanks for bringing that up, because I know a guy who used to be a council member who's now the mayor, who's been pushing this the entire time he's been in elected office. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
I don't know who you're talking about. So under empower, and then I'll let someone else go to their comments. I kind of sectioned mine. Under goal 7.1, that's page 9. I just wanted to, so our goal is to advocate for Fort Huachuca, and we just kind of stated that advocacy efforts. I would encourage you to include the outcome of that advocacy, because I think that you guys have some room to brag there, that we've had some good outcome from our advocacy efforts for Fort Huachuca. And, you know, it came to mind right off the bat is, of course, the effort last year where stopping the UAS from leaving the fort, you know, at least the missions that are on Fort Huachuca, and, you know, other efforts. So I think that there's some points that you guys could take some credit for under that goal. And under 7.2, does the fort taking on our dirt pile like fall under that goal of, you know, or is it really just that? I don't know if I'm saying this right. Like Fort Huachuca is really supporting Sierra Vista by taking on that, allowing us to prepare that site by taking on the dirt. I'm trying to just say it. Okay.
Chuck, could you explain what's going on there?
Does that make sense?
Okay, yes, Mayor Mueller, Councilmember Pacheco, a lot of work has been done, both by Tony Boone and the Public Works Department, and working with Fort Huachuca on what we can do with that dirt to reduce the cost associated with hauling it away. And it's very pleasing that the Fort has agreed to let us use some of their land to help spread some of that dirt, and that should reduce the cost substantially.
Okay, sir, anything else?
I think that's all my comments. Thank you.
Next. Jump in there. Don't let me start. Well, first I want to thank you ladies for covering some of the things I had to say, so I'll be brief. And actually I'm going to start at 7.3. It's an honorable item that deals with the West End Landmark Plaza and the opportunities to consolidate small business, etc. One of the, and incubate small businesses. And I will tell you, I've been impressed as a member of the Arizona Regional EDF Board that they're doing a great job in the locations they're doing that. So I would hope that we just don't duplicate that. And I'm not sure we will, or that's really going to be an issue. But I just want to bring that up again. If you go to 7.6, that's the one that talks about waterways and San Pedro Partnership and Recharge Network. We probably need to add Sentinel Landscapes to the verbiage as well, because we're involved with the Sentinel Landscape Program to make that more accurate. The next thing is it says partner with the Chamber, 7.7, partner with the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations to create and implement a plan that engages shopping locally. It talks about how we approached the Chamber in the fall of 2019. The leadership of the Chamber has changed, as well. The lady that's the what do they call it, director, as well as they have a new chairman of the board as of last Friday. We need to reapproach them and see if they are willing to partner on this item to make it more effective and more community related. Let's see. I understand on item 8.2. Explore and implement methods to address homelessness and housing, etc. I appreciate the fact that we're involved with the continuum of care, etc. But there's been a change in the executive director from the Good Neighbor Alliance, and I just wonder if we know if there's been a replacement, if that replacement is going to be involved in this organization as well, and kind of what the status is. so we understand what's going on there.
Well, Matt's been working on that one, so Matt, go ahead.
So GNA's in austerity mode. They have not refilled the executive director position. The administrative supervisor, Brad Rowland, has assumed those duties. They are working with the Department of Housing to explore additional funding opportunities that were brought about through the CARES Act to kind of shore up their budget. So that's the current status. And we're talking on a weekly basis. So nothing's changed since my last conversation with him last Thursday.
Okay.
Are
Anybody else?
mics open?
Say again, Gwen?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know the Good Neighbor Alliance program is dealing quickly with the housing issues. I'm wondering if we have any contact with what's going on with changes in the mental health field that are will affect the city, things that are happening that will benefit the community.
So you talk about the continuum of care group?
No, Matt, correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but continuum of care tends to deal primarily with housing.
Homelessness, ending homelessness.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, that there are some mental health things going on in the community that we probably need to have an update on so that we know what's going on to help those with mental illness in the community. And I just wonder if we have if we know anything about what's going on with that. And I'm not totally aware. I just know a new facility was coming into the community. And the pandemic has kind of interfered with that somewhat, I believe, financially. But we might need to find out more.
Clearly, we need to do a little research, Gwen.
I'll do that. I'll do
Okay,
that.
I mean, not just you, but everybody needs to get the feelers out.
Okay, and we'll bring it back. I'll bring back what I find out.
That's good point. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else on the plan? Going once, going twice. Okay. We're going to go on to revenue and presentation, the budget. And do we have, who's going to do it? Oh, it's going to be our assistant city manager. Go ahead, please. And welcome, Rachel.
Hey, Jill, are we able to get that loaded? Or switched?
Yeah, I guess nobody needs to make any jokes about Jill keeps getting loaded at the city council meetings. Okay. I've got it. Here we go.
All right, and you can go to the second slide, Jill. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So to start off with, as we shared last work session, our revenue projections were kept very conservative with all of the current unknowns over next year's revenue. So the revenue estimates that will be shared with you today are, again, they are all estimates, which we expect to revise as more data is received. Just about to get February's revenue numbers, which was a good month, and we don't expect to get March and April until May and June respectively. So there's still a lot unknown, but staff have done their best, and David is very good at this, to project our state shared revenues and local revenues as best we can. So today we're going to go over our general fund revenues, the highlights of our personnel budget and personnel changes, our requested O&M budget, and we did an update slide on capital improvement requests based on some comments from the last meeting. Next slide, Jill. So the general fund is our largest city fund, again, comprising approximately 45% of the city budget. We are not going to discuss enterprise funds today, but we'll cover those in 3 weeks at your next budget work session when we'll present the balanced budget to you. This pays for many of the services our departments provide, including the non-enterprise funds of our Public Works Department, which are fleet, facilities, and engineering. The revenue sources that make up the general fund are mostly listed in this slide for you. We're going to go over a number of these in the next slide, and we'll go on to the next slide. So starting with our local revenue, as we shared before, we are keeping the projection for local transaction privilege tax level with last year. And again, since we are getting February's revenue this month, it won't be until about May or June until we start seeing March and April. So we will have a better projection on that as time goes on. The property tax change is similar to why last year's changed, which is that the valuation of homes increased. And so the tax rate for the city, we will propose decrease from 0.1136 per $100 of assessed value to 0.1106 per $100 of valuation, which means on a home that's valued at $100,000, a property owner would pay $11.06 per 100,000. And that is to keep the increase below the threshold that would require the city to spend the money to publish the new rate. So that's why you see a slight increase there. It is not that the property tax rate is going up, it's that the valuation of homes has increased.
And do you know what the approximate cost of the publication of this data would be?
I think from last year it was something like $12,000 or $13,000, Mayor, but we can double check on that for you.
Well, that's important to know for us.
Maria, if I can back you up just real quick on the TPT. I know you said before we started that we're being very conservative. My question is, are we being conservative enough? Because we're basically going to have an entire month where a lot of businesses are simply not going to be paying into the TPT. So I'm not even sure that it is going to be the same.
Good job.
Okay, Mayor Mueller, Councilwoman Wolf. Basically, going into this fiscal year, we are looking at about a 5 to 6% revenue growth in TPT for next fiscal year. So we're already ratcheting that down by that 5 to 6% to the 0% change. As Victoria mentioned,
Chuck, you need to start over because I don't think Christine got it.
I can't, I'm sorry, Chuck, I can't hear you. The echo is.
Oh, it's really bad.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right, I'll start
very much like an echo chamber.
Okay. All right, Mayor Mueller, Councilwoman Wolf. When we started this fiscal year, it looked like we were going to be able to project a 5 or 6% increase in TPT. This is our first stab at taking it down, so we're ratcheting it down by that 5 or 6% by projecting flat right now. As Victoria mentioned, we're working right now on getting February's numbers in, which we assume will have been a pretty decent month. However, because of the lag with the reporting from Department of Revenue, we're not going to know about March and April till May and June. So as she mentioned, once those numbers start coming in, we have to be flexible enough to be able to take that and move that number down if need be. So we will be doing that. And then on the offsetting side, on the expenditures, I'll be looking at back the capital, improvement projects in order to balance. So that's the plan right now. And we'll just see as the numbers come in what adjustments we need to make. But I'm confident that we'll be able to make them.
Thank you, Chuck.
The other thing I may say is, if we remember, we didn't start getting our money from internet sales until when? 2000.
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And I was going to say that the TPT projection for last year did not include any internet sales.
So we're going to have some internet sales too, as kind of a small cushion. So that should be helpful. Any other questions on this slide? Mrs. Yarborough?
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, where is the internet, where is that included in the revenue? Will that be under?
That's part of TPT.
It won't be separated into a different category?
It's still transaction privilege tax. It just comes from a different source rather than regular. And it follows the same procedure under the state law. So we see it as a sales tax, even though we can ask them to separate that out if we want to.
It would be nice to be able to see that, see how much.
For the first couple of years, that would be a good, I would agree. If you can separate that out, I think that would be enlightening, but it's still part of the transition privilege tax. It would be say like saying, every hardware store we're going to just watch them and not everybody else. So.
In Mayor.
Yeah.
In the executive report, Gwen, they separate that out.
Indeed.
So in the next executive report, it's separated out.
Okay, that'll be good to see.
We thought, because I just remember seeing the online sales tax separated out in the executive report, so you can get that information. So.
Okay. Any other questions on local revenue? Mrs. Yarborough?
All right, so these are our charges for service by department. The change in general government revenue is based on actuals coming in from this year. The increase on public safety is primarily due to ambulance revenues, which is below what we actually saw last year, so we expect possibly slightly more there. In Public Works, the increase is primarily due to our fluids, which is oil changes or brake fluids. And those are when outside entities come in and use our services that we have intergovernmental agreements with to work on their primarily heavy equipment. And so those partnerships have been going well. And other enterprise funds are also charged back for those services. So that's where those increases from. Leisure and library services is another difficult area for us to project this year. We kept it level for this presentation, but we are working very closely with leisure and library services to try and project what their revenue might be for next year. I expect that number to most likely be revised down, and we'll know a lot more in the next couple weeks, and especially in May and June as we see things hopefully reopen and so on. Any questions on this slide?
I would just comment on the library and leisure services. On the leisure side, we can expect that last year we actually made money on Oktoberfest and some of the larger events. That may not be the case this year, so that's a concern.
Mr. Mayor, we will probably absolutely revise event revenue out of all of their various revenues back.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, for the public works, I know you said that includes the fuel and other partnerships we have. With the school districts setting up their own, I believe they're setting up their own fuel station, right? Are we gonna see it? Are we anticipating a decrease with that in this number?
Councilmember Humphrey, we included funds to continue that partnership with the school district, but we have heard that they are building their own fuel station. So that is something that we need to follow up with the superintendent and see if they have moved 100% to their own fuel station or if they will continue to purchase fuel from the city. So the fuel is currently budgeted and the revenue, but if we revise the purchase of fuel down, we will also correspondingly revise the revenue.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
No.
This is Sarah. And you said that the revenues for ambulance services were down.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Pacheco, no, they are up. Our revenue projection for next year is currently below what our actuals are trending for this year, but we wanted to keep that conservative.
Okay, that's it. I thought I heard below and I misheard what you were saying.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, intergovernmental revenue is primarily our state shared revenue. And again, our sales tax for next year projecting at level, and that FY20 budget did not include sales tax. The increase on income tax is because our income tax state shared revenue is a year behind. So that is fiscal year 2019's revenue, and it is adjusted for the population loss in the census. The vehicle license tax we are projecting as trending down because we expect most likely fewer sales of vehicles, and we expect to see a loss there. Grants are local grants described in the footnote below, and local government payments are our Fort ambulance contract. And I'll be happy to answer any questions on that slide.
Mr. Patich, comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
This is another area that we're trying to be very conservative in, particularly with regards to state shared sales tax. Our initial projections from the state on sales tax was a really hefty increase, and we've taken that back to zero. They have not yet given us the revised projections on that, but we're trying to get out ahead of that one. So that'll be another very conservative area of revenue projection for us.
Anybody else? I'm just going to comment about the vehicle licensing. Last month, I had a good conversation with one of our large local car dealers, and he said for some reason people were coming in and buying new cars. So if that were, hopefully, that's probably just an anomaly, but it did happen. So.
Well, that is good news, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, personnel for next year. So if you recall, last year we did a 2% classification and compensation shift and a 2% step increase for staff. And we did that and split the projected 4 to 5% shift needed in the classification and compensation plan to account for the minimum wage increase. So half of the increase was done last year, plus the 2% step increase. This year, we feel the market could potentially be very different given the current situation and not knowing how unemployment might go. So we made the decision to proceed with the 2% step increase, which will be approximately $400,000. We are working on the final number. It will probably be less than that, but we are going to hold off on the classification and compensation adjustment to reevaluate what the market is next year to see if that is still needed. Our new positions next year, again, being very conservative about adding new positions. We are going to fund the unfunded 2 police officer positions that were included in the budget last year and a management analyst for leisure and library services. Our PSPRS increase for next year is unfortunately $538,330, which again, we lag there. And so the steps that the city has taken to bring that number down, we won't see go into effect for another year yet. And in comparison, the ASRS increase for next year is just $14,345.
Questions?
Are we only looking at 2 new employees or 3 new employees for the coming year?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Calhoun, for new positions added, yes, that doesn't take into account refilling positions that are currently in the plan that are vacant or need to be refilled, although we are taking a very close look at refilling positions.
Mr. Mayor.
I see. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Calhoun, the 2 police officers were in the budget last year, but were unfunded. So we are funding, and planning on funding and recommending funding those for next fiscal year. We currently have implemented a hiring freeze based on the pandemic situation that we're in right now. And we're looking at rehires for positions that become unfilled due to some sort of attrition. And we're looking at that on a case-by-case basis.
I see.
We have to start planning for that eventuality in the event that our revenue situation does not bounce back well.
You know, what prompted my question was just one department, and that was, it seems as though the, I always forget the name of that department, communications, Judy's department. They just seem to be so tremendously busy that I'm surprised they can operate with the 3 staff members that are there? And I was just curious that they are not looking to get any new employees in that department.
Chuck, you want to comment?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Calhoun, I certainly like very busy, productive departments. So that's a good thing. We're not really in a position to hire many new people next fiscal year, just based on what's going on right now. So, but she has at least, I'd say 5 staffers working for her. So yes, they're busy. Would they want to have more help? Certainly they would. But this is just a situation where I don't think we can move forward on something like that right now.
I see. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, any other comments about the personnel slide? Victoria?
All right, what we're sharing with you here is the O&M requests that the departments turned in. Now is the point where we take these requests and we comb through them and match requests to projected revenue and personnel requests and I mean the personnel budget and so on. So now's where the bulk of the work to balance the budget comes in. So this is very much a work in progress, and expect to see these numbers go down for next time.
Chuck?
I'd just like to go back to personnel and talk just very briefly about what we try to do philosophically here with regards to all our departments, not just communications. We came out of recession, and we're in a position where we had to keep our personnel numbers down through all that time. One thing we try to be is very, very careful with regards to new hires, even though things were improving. And we see the results of that now heading into what looks to be probably one very tough budget years as a result of what's going on right now. So when you end up adding a lot of personnel and times are good, it becomes a very difficult problem to deal with when times aren't so good. So by keeping our employee numbers down, we actually find ourselves, I think, in a lot better position to deal with what's coming. And I think every city in the state is going to be dealing with some of these issues, but I feel that we're in a strong position with regards to that.
Okay. I want to ask a couple of questions about this. I know this is essentially a request, and it hasn't been refined. I know that. But when I go down the list, the one that jumps out to me is the library. And why is it such a, percentage-wise, a drastic difference? Is there something we're missing? That doesn't include, I'm assuming that doesn't include the new roof, and it doesn't include the, what was the other thing? Was it new computers? Yeah, new computers.
Mr. Mayor, part of what we do when I sit down with the departments to do the initial pass on this before it goes to Chuck for approval is there are oftentimes some things that are in one budget that the departments ask for that should actually be in another budget. And so specifically in the library case, why that number is so high is because they put the amount that the Friends of the Library grant to them in one of their O&M lines. And we determined that that amount should be shifted to the grant budget.
Yes.
So that's why that number looks so high in comparison to the normal budget.
That would explain it. Thank you. Any other questions on the O&M?
What's the difference from the grant fund from the Friends of the Library?
Mr. Benning, I can't recall that exact number off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to get that to you after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Ask the same question of the admin budget. Admin services budget. That's also a huge difference.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Pacheco, that one I unfortunately don't have off the top of my head why that number is so much higher, but I will remember to circle back to that at the next meeting. Probably is the IT budget. So admin services covers IT, HR, procurement, city clerk, economic development, and communications and marketing. So one of the issues there that we had is initially 2 capital projects, which were about $225,000, were accounted for in the IT budget, and that was the council AV system and the new library computers. So again, we go back and review the budgets and look at those and say, these 2 are capital projects and those need to be shifted to the capital budget. So I'm fairly certain that's why that one has such an increase, and I will go back and double check on that.
Yeah. What's included in the city council budget?
Councilmember Calhoun, that is there are association memberships, travel and training. You have a small budget for supplies, and that's where a lot of things like some awards come out of. And that's about it, really. There's very few lines in the city council budget.
Thank you. What does that last line, allocations out are not included? What does that mean?
That means that there are allocations to enterprise funds that are calculated at a later date. And so those aren't included in the budget at this time. To go back real quick to your question on the city council budget, some of the things that we budget for in there, like the city's National League of Cities membership, is budgeted under the City Council Association membership line.
I was just curious.
Okay. Please.
All right, we put a slide back in on your capital improvement prioritized list to show that the council chambers AV upgrade is included. And so are the new library paging computers. And again, those were pulled out of the IT budget and moved into the capital improvement budget where they should be. So this list has not changed with the exception of those 2 items from last time you saw it 2 weeks ago.
So, Victoria, with the exception of those costs that are parts of previous programs, items 1, 2, and down at the Walmart and cost share, who will make the final decision, or how will we make the final decision which items we actually can afford to do this year?
Keep it answer this one.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Calhoun, ultimately, the budget comes through me for final recommendation to the council, and depending on where our revenue projections are at that time, some of these items may change. Ultimately, the decision on what's included in the budget is determined by mayor and council. So when we go through the budget work sessions, I believe in early June, then council will make the final determination.
Okay, thank you. I know that comes with a lot of conversation, though, and you give us a lot of input on why you make the recommendations you do and how we can let's make that
To
decision.
kind of address that a little, you kind of lead into a comment I wanted to make, Gwen, so I appreciate it. When you look at the first bunch of them, if you go to the strategic plan column, the first two items deal with safety items for the fire department. You have council AV upgrade, which is should be part of the strategic plan. If it's not, I think it is. You have then you have another safety item for emissions control devices. Then you have the next three items are part of the strategic plan that we've already agreed to. And I would argue that if you go down to item number 10, surface water master plan, we just talked about is a strategic item. So that should also have a yes in that column. So that kind of tells you the priorities that we've already given the staff to work on it. And the questions I would ask is the cost share with the county and the cost share with Walmart. Are those more important than the surface water master plan if we have to cut? And we're not at the point yet where we've got recommendations from the staff on what we have to eliminate from this list.
That clarifies it too.
Anybody else? Okay. Favorite slide.
So what we're doing next is meeting with all the departments to work on those O&M budgets and personnel, finish up those numbers and projections. So in 3 weeks at your next work session, we can come back to you with a balanced budget. We'll also be working on the enterprise funds, revising those revenue projections as best we can. So when we come back to you in 3 weeks, we have a balanced budget. After that, we'll work on completing the tentative budget book, which, jumping ahead to my next slide, your balanced budget work session will be May 12th, and then we work to get the tentative budget book out to you by May 22nd. May 26th through 29th, we'll schedule one-on-one council member meetings for whomever would like one. And then June 1st through 3rd, we will schedule our overall budget work sessions for the public. The tentative budget vote will take place on June 11th. Your final budget vote and property tax hearing is scheduled for July 9th, with your property tax vote and the final step of the budget process scheduled for July 23rd. With that, I am finished, Mr. Mayor, and open to any final questions.
Final questions. I shouldn't say final because we're going to be talking about this all again at any time. I would encourage you, if you think of questions in between, that you get with the staff. And then depth discussion and get those questions answered. Anything else from the council? All right, then we're going to move to the Community Development Block Grant COVID CARES Act funding update. And Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to go take a little potty break. I'll be right back. You got the chair.
Yes, sir. Rachel, before we start on this, can I just make a statement? This is Christine, by the way. I have looked through and reviewed this presentation, and I just want our community to know that I will be involved in this, even though it could apply to me, because I will not be applying for any kind of funding.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, are you presenting this?
Yes.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so Tony and I are going to take you through a couple options that comply with the initial guidance that we received from HUD on the use of CARES Act funding. We're looking for your feedback on where and to whom this funding should be directed and at what proportions. The amount we're set to receive through the Act to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19 is $159,897. A couple points that we now have confirmation on. First is that the normal 15% cap on public services was lifted for coronavirus efforts. And second, if the city wanted to move ahead of HUD making the money available, we can seek reimbursement of eligible expenditures that are incurred in the meantime. Now, we're told that the fund should be ready for disbursement by the end of the month, which fits our proposed schedule, so that shouldn't be necessary. Next slide, please. In terms of planning considerations, we learned that the CV funds are to be added to the most recently adopted annual action plan in the form of a substantial amendment, which for us is the 2019 program year. Once we have your feedback on funding priorities, we can put the amendment together relatively quickly. Right now, we've tentatively scheduled this item for your May 14th agenda with an abbreviated public comment period, which HUD instituted to push the funding out faster. Moving on to the next slide, turning now to eligible activities. We downloaded a quick guide put out by HUD that provides examples of projects and programs that fit the CARES Act intent. So far, we've been fortunate here in Cochise County with the number of cases not overwhelming our public health system. There's not a foreseeable need or budget available for constructing or adapting any building or for treatment or care facilities. It's our recommendation that council consider funding public service and economic development assistance programs to help prevent people from becoming homeless or businesses from going bankrupt. The best we can offer with the amount of money we've been allocated is supplemental assistance that hopefully can be leveraged against other programs. Next slide. It is stipulated that providing assistance to small business to enable retention of jobs held by low to moderate income persons is an eligible activity. Tony will be elaborating on what we're contemplating in that regard, as well as the other economic development assistance recommendations that don't seem to fit here. With the next slide, provision of new or quantifiably increased public services. They are eligible for consideration. The examples provided in this chart are more oriented towards mounting a public health response than dealing with social and economic issues resulting from the large swaths of our economy being at a standstill for a month or more. So with that background, going on to the next slide, we're recommending that the council consider dividing up the CARES Act funding to provide financial assistance to individuals and businesses to help them bridge the gap. And that's exactly the name of one of the programs that we're recommending. Going on to the next slide, the Grombacher Assistance Program is an emergency crisis fund that's administered by United Way to assist community members in dire straits. United Way has the connections in the place to distribute the needed funds to area nonprofits and can serve as a central point of contact. They are amenable to working within any parameters that are set by council on how the funding should be allocated across the nonprofit community and for what purpose. The GAP program could fund things like hotel motel vouchers. If the Samaritan's nature reaches capacity, it could help with rent and utility payments and mental health counseling. Any specific terms and conditions would be incorporated into a subrecipient contract that will be signed by all parties before services begin. Okay, so that's on the social services side, and we're now going to turn to Tony's recommendations for emergency small business grant assistance, starting with the next slide.
Before you go, I want Chuck to make a comment. Chuck?
One thing that we were looking at when trying to put together some ideas for getting assistance out to either individuals or small businesses is trying to get it out as quickly as possible. So we're trying to look for the most expedient ways.
Can't hear you. We're starting to look for the most expedient way.
Okay. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Before Tony starts, one of the main precepts that we've tried to employ in coming up with some ideas for these particular programs is expediency. We know people need help right away, and we're trying to devise and find ways and work with people so that we can get this additional money out to the public as soon as possible. So that's why you're seeing some of the ideas that we're putting forward in terms of trying to work with agencies that are already working in these areas that we think need to be targeted.
Thank you, Chuck. Tony, you're up.
All right, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so on this slide, really as I've looked, we went out and covered probably somewhere between 12 and 15 different communities across the nation that had gone after either loans or grant applications. And Mr. Mayor, in our conversation, you wanted to look at a city that was comparable. We actually found La Crosse, Wisconsin, roughly same size, same county size. But again, we were really trying to see where each of the communities across the country were looking to go with their CDBG money. And at the end of the day, it goes back to retaining jobs and retaining businesses. You'll see the amounts. In many cases, some of the communities are doing things such as $1,500 to $2,000. In my discussions with both chambers as well as the SBDC, there's a lot of work for $1,500 to $2,000. So many communities are playing in the $5,000 to $10,000, and the intent is really only as a bridge. And having seen that the Senate passed additional funding for the PPP program, so if you think about this, it would be a quick turn to provide really just a very short bridge. On this one, because it's CDBG, we got to make sure that we keep in mind the economic requirement. And really, and Matt and myself, our discussion with the HUD representative, this one truly becomes a significant issue in the low to medium income household. And if you just use a family of 4 in Sierra Vista, that comes down to $47,900. Now, there's 2 ways that communities have dealt with this. One is if the business owner with their tax return from last year can qualify under that standard, or if they maintain employees that they can certify that would be maintained with that standard. So just a key point as we go forward, kind of to look at the economic requirement. Next slide, please.
Tony,
please.
I think this is key, and especially key for the people that are applying. You give us one thing about 47.9 for a family of 4, but there's also a different amount of money for a single individual, a married couple, a family of 3, a family of 5, whatever it may be. And do we have that data so that we can make sure that it's in the application when these folks come in to ask for the help?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we've got it. I've got it from Matt. And if I use the La Crosse application, they include the entire spreadsheet. So,
okay, great.
So each individual would look at their individual circumstances to know if they do qualify or if their employees would qualify.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. Some of the requirements that have been laid out in most cases, if not all cases, this is a for-profit business. So we would not be funding or supporting the nonprofits. Each community has chosen to be whether proactive or eliminate certain types of businesses, but in most cases, they're looking at restaurants, bars, small retail, and services. The key, of course, is that they're locally owned and independently operated. And then the next criteria, many communities have tied into particular classes, whether it be minority or women-owned businesses, and also a redevelopment area or West End partnership in our case. So what that would look like is, as opposed to some of the other programs, I would recommend that we do this as a competitive program with additional criteria such as capacity, experience to operate the business, their readiness to proceed, the impact of COVID-19, the employee retention. I'd put an element in there for minority or women-owned businesses if they were in fact a Section 3. And then, of course, many have tied it to a retail district. I think it would tie into our redevelopment area on the West End. But again, that would give us an opportunity to evaluate the applications. And within the budget or the parameters that you set, those that would meet their criteria to the highest level would get the funding. And again, if the agreement on the grant side is to maintain 2 full-time employees, as long as they can prove at the end that they've met that requirement, then we would turn this officially into a grant. So from a management perspective, the city staff more than likely could handle it. Chuck and I had a brief conversation this morning whether we could do it on a reimbursable side for a lease or mortgage payment or employee cost. But we've got some flexibility. I just kind of wanted to let you know what we found in other communities across the country, just to kind of give you some ideas as we move forward.
So Tony, what I'm hearing, and you correct me, please correct me if I'm wrong here. What I'm hearing is what we need to do is have basically a form that tells them what the criteria are. We would put it out to the folks. They would apply. We would have a grading system of some type to make sure that we hit it's competitive because we only have so much money. So we take care of the minorities and women. We take care of the locally owned and independent operated and those kind of things. And each one of those would have some type of scoring system. And I'm assuming between you and Matt, you would sit down and actually have a meeting and say, okay, here's the highest 3 or the highest 5 or whatever we could fund, the highest 10 on the business side, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, right. We would do it by a panel so that we could independently do that. And in our discussions with HUD, they wanted to see what our criteria was. So based on your guidance today, we'll go back and look at the types of businesses, the specific size. The micro enterprises would be 5 employees or below. Many communities have raised it up to 10, but again, the intent is to go to small businesses locally owned. And then, yes, that criteria.
They have to meet the criteria of that's the big thing is minimally they have to meet the criteria for the income.
Yes, sir.
Low to moderate income, I should say. Yeah.
So my question is I'm fine with all of this except for the one portion of restricting it just to the west end. Do we need to do that because it's CDBG and that fits a low to mod income area? Or what is the reasoning for that if it's just for the partnership? Because we have businesses all over town that are suffering that meet the other criteria, and I don't want to exclude them.
Mayor Pro Tem Gray, the intent would be not to exclude them, but what we would do, or what we could do, is to give them preferential treatment. So again, trying to link it back to the low to moderate income area. But again, if we would open it up to all of the businesses that met the criteria. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I don't even think I want to prioritize it by anything, just because if they meet the low to mod and the other criteria, I'm okay with them applying on a first come first serve basis.
This is Christine, and I actually agree with Rachel. That was one of the things that I actually wrote down as well as one of my questions. Is I think it should be throughout the city if they do and they are low to moderate income. I agree that that's fair. Businesses are really hurting right now, and we need to help everybody, not just in one particular section.
Especially in light of we're already doing quite a bit with the West End partnership. So,
yes, ma'am.
Other comments?
I agree with both of them. Rachel and Christina.
Carol?
I have a couple questions. My first one is, what are we counting? And I'm looking through and I'm trying to find the slide that we would help them with essential services. And I know this sounds like a really dumb question, but as somebody who is dealing with define as essential.
did we say that it had to be essential? Did I miss that somewhere?
Am I confusing that with the other slide? I might be.
I don't see it, Christine, on the business part, but I'm just.
Am I confusing that, Tony?
Yes. I guess the simple answer is we don't necessarily have to include that. And each community has defined the service businesses uniquely different to their community.
Okay, I'm okay with that. And then I guess my other question is, and again, I've been having a lot of people come at me with different things lately. And my question is that I'm looking at that our goal and this is slide 9. Our goal is to keep businesses open and retain jobs negatively impacted by COVID-19. Understood. The next part, and this next part is when a lot of people have been asking me questions about not only with this, but with the other PPP. And then we're saying is that we have to maintain employees for another 6 months. I know a lot of business owners are scared that it's going to take longer than that. And how do you bring it back and say that even though we get this small grant, then you have to keep payroll going for 6 months, and they're afraid that they're not going to get the business back to be able to maintain that employee for that amount of time.
Right, and agree. I mean, and that's the trick with this one because one, the grants are relatively small. And in most cases, the communities have tied the grant requirement to maintaining one employee. So they've tried to keep it to the bare minimum, most likely because the business owner would not meet the low to moderate income household standard. So the trick is.
Can I jump in here real quick? I think what we're confusing PPP with this, because when I say economic requirement that's on the slide, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, please. It doesn't say that you have to keep the employee for 6 months. I know that's a requirement under PPP, but the question is that a requirement under this program?
And that's my question.
I think the details are yet to be developed. We're just kind of outlining the broad parameters of what.
That's an important question, Matt.
Sure.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, based on the discussion we had with the HUD representative, we've got to finalize both the program and our selection criteria, and then we've got to bounce that back to them for approval. And again, having looked at 12 different communities, they're all doing it slightly different. And the real key is that when this is all done, when the federal government goes back to look at it, we've got to have clear rules and guidance kind of as we move along. So the 6 months on that one was one community's attempt to put it in. So.
And I would say my big thing, I completely agree that we need all kinds of rules and stuff, totally understand. And we need to be able to look at things in a way that we can give it to businesses in a fair way. I have some major concern about the 6 month time period. Especially because it's going to be a very small amount of money. We're not talking
90 days. Maybe
what I'm trying to say, Christine, is the 6 month time period for PPP is in effect. This is not PPP.
No, I understand,
We can basically establish our own rules. If we want to say it's a one-time grant, and 6 months later they got to come back and tell us how they spent it, that's an entirely different thing.
No, I agree. I'm just looking at slide 9, and it says on slide 9, under the goal, grant if they meet all requirements such as maintaining employees for 6 months. And I'm just saying, I think that is a lot. Right.
Well, the point you're making is that needs to not be in our requirements. That's what some other folks have done, right, Tony?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's why I put such as maintaining employees. So again,
that doesn't mean we're required to do it.
Correct.
Okay, and I agree with Christine's assessment on this as well.
I'll be honest, the trick is because it's such a small amount, is trying to make this streamlined and still meet the federal requirements. It makes it for an interesting project.
Yeah.
So let me jump in with that comment you just made, Tony. This is such a small amount, and it really is. What I'm not clear on is there a recommendation that we do funding for the nonprofits as well as the businesses with that 159?
Gwen, we're not there yet, but Chuck wanted to make a comment. We'll come back. Can I come back to you?
Oh, sure. I just want to understand if we're talking about the 159 for business, or is it going to be?
We haven't discussed.
Okay,
we're going to split it or not. There's basically two options. We haven't got a recommendation from staff on how they want to do it.
Oh, okay.
Mayor Mueller, members of the council, we're looking at kind of a two-pronged approach here. One deals with social services. That one is where we're proposing potentially using the United Way as a conduit for meal assistance, mental health assistance, rental assistance, those kinds of things for individuals working through. And they don't have to necessarily be ones that United Way generally works with, but the council can also direct and choose, other agencies as well. And we have had discussions with United Way about using some of the funds for that type of social assistance, and they are amenable to doing that. And also today I was able to talk with the chair of the United Way, and they would keep their admin costs down to 5% using the Groundbacher Assistance Fund to do that. So that would be a quick way to get assistance out to individuals that are needing help. The second prong is the economic development prong that we've been discussing here. And we're still kicking around ideas and trying to formulate exactly where we want to go, of course, with council's input. Another idea I had is let's treat it the same way as we're treating or looking at social services, only the city would administer this and help with assistance for the same types of things, utilities, leasing, rent, mortgages, that kind of thing. So that's another idea we've been kicking around as well. So, it's just a matter of which way the council wants to go, but we can divide up this money pretty much, in half, 80,000 for social assistance, 80,000 for business assistance, or however you want to do it. But that's just a simple way of looking at it.
This is the reason I wanted to interject this a piece about the nonprofits. I know my nonprofit, Arizona Community Foundation, for the last 3 weeks have been giving out money on a weekly basis to nonprofits in the community with their applications for the money. So I think before we make a huge commitment to the nonprofit community, it would be helpful, Chuck, to talk to Angie over at Arizona Community Foundation and Margaret at Legacy to see what the actual need really is in the nonprofit community. Even though we've been designating quite a bit of funds, we haven't had a huge request. And we've also seen that a lot of the nonprofits of course, they're almost always having difficulty with their funding, but they're using some of the requests to do more than, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, to do more than support their needs because of the pandemic. And the funds that Arizona Community Foundation, actually out of Phoenix, and Phoenix is helping with some of the funding, they've received a huge amount. I think it was up to around $8 billion in a special fund just for the pandemic. So before we worry too much about having to split that 50-50 or however, it would do good to have a brief conversation with those different foundations. And CCAP is also receiving a tremendous amount of money from DES. And they do that, utilities, they do rent support, as well as right here in the community. I guess Salvation Army does. You know about that, Mayor, but St. Vincent de Paul also. So it's not a lot of money, and probably, I hate to say this without just being able to back it up for sure, but probably those foundations and the other organizations can handle a good part of what the nonprofits need, and that might leave a little bit more for us to be able to support small businesses in the community.
Gwen, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Mayor, I was going to add, very similar to Gwen, I think she said it best, a similar comment that I've seen a lot of opportunity for funding that's being put out there for nonprofits at the local level. So it's much more accessible than some of the federal programs that go out. And businesses, on the other hand, I've heard a lot of struggle with getting any sort of funding for businesses or any sort of help, and that there seems to be a lot more struggle there. That's just my experience, and I do think it's worth the conversation with some of our larger foundations, but because they're here and the funding is a little bit more accessible because we have these local sources that help nonprofits here, that has been a little bit of a quicker response for nonprofits.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the idea on the social service side that we were in.
You're breaking up, Chuck.
The idea that we were trying to envision on the social service side was not so much funding the nonprofits, but trying to find conduits to get money to individuals as quickly as possible. And using the various nonprofits, in this case through the United Way, to do that. Now, you know, how much you want to do that, or if you want to focus more on the business side, that's completely up to the council.
Mayor, can I interject right here?
Sure.
Thank you. So I do understand trying to get it to the individuals, and Glenn honestly couldn't have said it any better than I could have said that. But I guess I'm looking at it as if we can use this federal money that's very hard for small businesses to get right now to help them stay in business. Ultimately, that actually helps individuals through employees better than just a one-time individual payment to kind of tide them over, because we really need those small businesses to stay in business so that they can continue to employ our local individuals. And so that's my opinion on it.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Is there a way, I'm sorry, Gwen, is there a way to prioritize the individuals that fall through the cracks and don't qualify for the delay in evictions and payments? Like they're not going to get assistance through the CARES Act?
I missed the first part of how you were asking that.
Can we prioritize those that wouldn't get assistance? Because not everyone is covered by the CARES Act. It covers like if you have a mortgage, or if you have if you're in like federal subsidized housing. But if you're a renter, there's a bunch of people who aren't covered.
Carol, I think the short answer to your question, and Chuck, jump in if I'm off base here, is if we do go the route where we have the United Way and the agreement we would have with them, we could give them a priority that says priority goes to people who don't qualify for other programs that meet the what's the 20 the lower 80% or whatever the qualification is for the family.
80% of median.
80% of median income or whatever it may be.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. That's a way to do that, I think. Chuck is checking his head.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
When?
Didn't the governor stop evictions for everyone?
No. That's a falsehood.
Oh, wow. I thought he did.
There's a specific list that talks about people that have been primarily affected by COVID, or they're out of work because of COVID. It's not everyone. There's
No. I understand that it has to be related to COVID, but I mean, to Carolyn's point, is I thought the governor had prohibited eviction for anyone unable to make rent or mortgage if they were out of work because
there are specific qualifications, so it doesn't cover everyone. You need to go back to read his.
I will read the executive order again.
Because it's like on the second page, about halfway down the page, because I went through this with an individual that was having issues. I'll put it that way.
Okay, I'll read it again. Thank you, Mayor.
Finally, Gwen.
Yeah, I would like to make a suggestion to, I don't know, Chuck or whoever's going to manage this, that perhaps United Way works with the other large foundations that are giving out money. And I say that again, Chuck, just to avoid some of the, I don't know how to say, some of the, pardon me?
I think that's a good point, Gwen. I think what you're trying to say, and slap me next time you see me if I get the words wrong here. But I think it's a good suggestion that we go to the other two foundations and say, what can you do for us? And in fact, if they could do the same thing without charging the 5%, that's even better. I don't know if they're in the posture to do that. The thing about using the Grumbacher fund, it's already set up and ready for operation. People know where it is, etc. So that may be a time saver. I don't know, but we gotta ask the question of the other two agencies.
I only want to be sure, and I'll just be blunt, the double dipping doesn't occur. And only by knowing what the other organizations have been giving will United Way know how to proceed, I think.
Yeah.
It's a constant problem in the nonprofit, or especially in the rent reimbursement and that sort of stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Utilities and all of that, you know that, so.
And it's got to be for somebody that's not a normal person that's gotten themselves in trouble with lack of paying rent or utilities. It's got to be COVID related somehow. And I'm not sure how we justify that in every case, but that's going to be a challenge.
They have figured some of that out, so that's another reason to work with them.
So we got a mission, Chuck, to go check out the other two foundations, see if they can assist us. Okay. The discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for the purpose of the substantial amendment to the annual action plan, that will just include the broad descriptions, emergency business assistance, and the GAP program or whatever social service we intend to fund. I just need to know for drafting purposes what amounts. Are you good with 50-50? Do you want to do 80-20?
Here's what I'm going to suggest to the council, and you guys tell me this. What I'm hearing is most folks are focused primarily on helping businesses. Am I reading you right?
Correct.
Okay, so for the purposes of getting something on the table to vote, what I'm going to suggest is we break it down to 100,000 for business and 59.99.999 or whatever the hell it is, or for the other. And obviously, that's a point of discussion once this comes to the table. If we need to adjust it to 40 or 20 for individual relief and more for the businesses, or the other way around, we can discuss that again at that time. That's my suggestion.
With that.
Can we live with that till it comes on the table?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's as simple as a program description with the amounts for the purpose of the annual action plan amendment. And then the details can be hammered out and presented back to you later.
I think the 59 is kind of high, Mayor.
Well, I just threw that out there. If you want to go 50 and 109,999, that's.
I was thinking more than 30. Okay.
But I mean, we'll just get it on
Taking $1.
We just got to get it on the. We got to get it on the table. The clock is ticking, as we all know here. Okay, Matt, did you want to cover anything else on this slide?
No, that's it. That concludes my presentation.
The council, did you have any questions on this last slide that you're dying to answer or have answered? Well, we do need to go, Matt, to the other two agencies and see what kind of help they can give us, or if they're even interested in giving us assistance. I know United Way was an easy one to reach out to because we have connections with our former personnel directors, one of their board members. So that was an easy way to drill, but we certainly talked to the other two foundations.
And so again, what we want to target with the assistance is mental health counseling, rent, utility assistance, perhaps hotel motel vouchers.
I don't think we have any problems with what you proposed on that.
Okay, so we're just looking for an administrator that can fulfill those aims, potentially zero cost.
Somebody that will partner with us, hopefully for less than 5%.
Got it. Okay.
To get it done. So I think that they may have a better deal for us. You know, more money we can get to the folks, the better.
Okay.
I think we're all agree on that.
Dusty, no.
Okay. Any other last comments on this item?
Dusty approves. Sorry about that, guys.
When do we expect to see this, Matt?
May 14th.
We're talking about
Next meeting.
we're going to wait. We're not going to, you and I talked about a potential for a special meeting.
I would be very pro a special meeting if we could get.
Me too.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because as soon as you guys have a workable plan, we need to sit down and talk. I want to say we, you, me, and Chuck and Tony, and then we need to figure out when's the appropriate time for us to have a work session / council meeting. Or I know we have to give people 5 days notice. Is that the deal?
Yeah, okay, so we'll huddle tomorrow and get back with you. You know, gave us some assignments to carry out, and
we gotta remember
we'll shoot to try to move it up a week.
We got to remember the clock is ticking, and if we have to have a special meeting via computer, then we'll do that.
Got it.
Okay. Any problems with that, guys?
None of us will be on vacation, I don't guess.
Not going anywhere.
What do you go to the Bahamas? Okay.
When I found out we had to quarantine for 2 weeks in Hawaii, we decided not to go.
Yeah. Okay. See, where are we? We're on that's the CARES Act. Matt, did you have anything else you needed guidance on?
That's all I needed from council. Thank you.
Chuck, anything else? We're good? Okay. Then we're going to move on to reports, recent trips.
Just say,
ma'am.
Excuse me, Mayor, I just want to say I really appreciate the tremendous amount of work I know they had to go through to get even to this point on dealing with the CARES Act. And well, we won't even talk about the budget stuff, but that CARES Act is, thank you so much for all you've done on that, Matt and Tony and all those involved.
Yeah, they're doing a good job and trying to move as fast as the bureaucracy will allow it. And that's good.
That's the thing.
Okay, now we're on to item E, reports, recent trips, meetings, future meetings. Anybody been doing anything?
I went to the backyard.
All right.
My veggies are starting to grow.
Oh, good. Anything else? Okay, future discussion and council requests. Do we have anything on the items there, Victoria? Just the budget. That should be enough, plus what we just talked about.
Mayor, you know, I had that item I wanted to
remind me.
It was about the hummingbird capital of the United States.
It's a good time to talk about how you can get that accomplished.
Okay, I haven't worked out a strategic plan yet, but I wanted to run it by the rest of the council just to know it was something I was thinking about. And that is, I was reading an article about Ash Fork, Arizona. Don't ask me why, but it was interesting in the fact that they were named, let me read what I have here, a housing development association gave the town the name, the Flagstone Capital of the World, because they have a bunch of flagstone mines or something like that. So anyway, I've always wondered about us being the hummingbird capital, and what happened with the Flagstone capital is they called it that, and then somebody had it officially named Flagstone capital by the State House of Representatives. So I thought, as a tourism effort, we could see if our state representatives would stop laughing, Rachel.
Laughing.
Our representatives would make it.
You'll know how I feel about birds.
Laughing. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Would make it official that the area around Rachel's house could be called the hummingbird.
There you go.
I think it would be a great tourism piece to make it official and make a big deal out of it. And it goes along with the Hummingbirds of Hope that we're working on right now. If we could have our representatives pass a state law calling us the hummingbird capital of the United States.
So we'll all get our thinking caps on and figure a way to do that. Is that what you're asking?
Well, there's quite a bit online through government to figure out how to make the actual proposal. I guess we would need to see if Gail or Becky.
Well, the first step has got to be we go to the experts who tell us all the time that we have more varieties of hummingbirds than any place else in the country, and validate that. And that's got to be part of our argument that we did. And then
Oh, I see.
that should be part of our argument of doing that. The council probably needs to make a resolution as well, move it forward to the legislators, and we need to work with Becky and Senator Griffin, or excuse me, Representative Griffin, and the good senator, and anybody else in the tourism department at the state that we can motivate to be on our side to get it moved through the next legislative session.
Okay.
Mayor, as much as I hate to contribute to this idea, would Judy has those numbers, right? Like the number of visitors we have, and
The visitors are fine. If we're going to claim to be the hummingbird capital, we need to say this is why. And the more varieties of hummingbirds than any other place in the country is probably the best reason.
So do we have to, is the council like giving consensus to move ahead with that?
Well, I told you this was your project. You need to come back and present it to us as a way forward.
a discussion item.
I have to do all that work and then somebody could say no?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I really,
I thought is it okay if I start working?
I think you have a consensus when start working.
Yes.
Was that, okay. I thought that was Chuck saying it was okay.
I think you have a consensus to start working.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thanks. That was kind of on my mind.
All right. So I think that's a good initiative. Okay. Anything else on that item? We're not going to go back to talk about coronavirus. I didn't get anything out of the governor's office this week, although on Friday, this should be in your read file. I sent out an item. Let's see what it was entitled. Let's see, feedback on lifting restrictions. If you haven't seen that, I recommend you look at that. Share your ideas and comments with me. And basically was talking about the main gist of it was that in a rural county where we get less than so many people, we're less than one person a day that has contracted COVID. We are small enough where we are statistically insignificant enough not to meet the president's criteria for getting out of COVID. So you have to do something else. That's the whole point. I've made a number of recommendations, and I would appreciate if you look at that. And if you have some questions, concerns, or better ideas, please, I'll steal your ideas. Not a problem. So if you got some better ideas, let me know, and we'll take that. I think I've shared it with our state legislators. I'd like to hear from you before I, even though it's a governor's decision, I'd also like to share those same comments with our congressional delegation as well. I haven't done that yet.
Can you say anything about what kind of testing is going on in the county?
No, I didn't, but I will tell you that from what Mr. Gomes tells me, they have adequate testing available for both personnel as well as folks. And of course, the way they're doing it is they're not testing everybody that says, I want to test. That's going to probably continue for some time. And I know you're a nurse and you understand why when you give somebody a test, if they come back negative, that means they're still vulnerable. It doesn't mean they're any better off from having the test. And so I know there's a lot of discussion going on nationally as well as statewide about what really should we test for, how often should we test, and who should be eligible for test. And I didn't really want to get into that whole discussion in my recommendations.
I'll read it.
Mr. Mayor. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
If I can say, I read your recommendations and I really, I support them. I think they were really good, especially looking at opening places up with a 50% capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
Thing that I've had a lot of other business owners come to me and say, that, you know, 4 people is better than 0 people.
Yeah, that's right.
I really appreciated your recommendations, and I thought it was well put, and I thought it was well thought out. So I just want to thank you for doing them.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, Christine, and I tell you, I don't get a warm fuzzy feeling that the governor's going to act soon. That's just my gut. Okay,
I tend to agree.
I would hope that he at least announce maybe next week that, hey, on this date we're going to start doing some of this stuff. But again, he kind of waits to see what the other governors are doing. Now that some of the other governors are lightening up on this, I can see maybe he's going to feel more comfortable doing that. And obviously, he's making a conscious decision based on all the information, and I'm sure he's got more information than I have. So we kind of got to work with him. We can't disparage him. We can't second guess him and those kind of things. We got what we got, and we're going to have to work through it together.
And to add to what Christine said, Mr. Mayor, I read them too, and I like that it was under the conditions, like you wouldn't make those recommendations now, and I hope people understand you're not trying to suggest those things take place right now. It's under the conditions that we're only saying 1 or 2 cases. I can't remember the exact.
If we stay where we are, where we're less than 1 case a day, I mean, it makes sense for us to do something different. That's all I'm suggesting. If we get a big goal where we had 5 people tomorrow and 5 people the next day, well, we need to stop and reassess. Okay, Chuck, did you want to share anything, or did the chief want to share anything on the COVID-19?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Obviously, we're paying close attention to what the governor's guidance is, and hopefully Thursday we'll get a better clarification of what he plans to do after April 30th. I don't think anybody, as the mayor mentioned, knows what that's going to be at this point. Nonetheless, there are some issues coming up with other parts of the country opening up, and I do have concerns about people wanting to get started and get their businesses opened, or any potential unrest or anything that may occur as a result of people getting cabin fever or that kind of thing. So enforcement is going to be a big issue, and of course talking to the chief about those kind of things. Right now we have not been heavily enforcing a lot of these guidelines, primarily because most people in Sierra Vista are adhering to the guidelines. Of course, we do get reports of different things that occur, and enforcement is always an issue in some of those things that get reported to us. So that's a concern going forward. Internally, as you know, we had a potential positive case covered last week.
Chuck, you're fading again.
We had a potential employee case positive last week. So we implemented shutting down completely the OICC, the EBC, as well as the library to employees as well. So those buildings are completely shut right now. And all those employees that we think had exposure, which now numbers 29, have been notified, and then they're all on the 14-day leave plan FEL program right now. So we have that going on, and we're not aware yet of any other positive tests that may have come out of that. So all those folks are in quarantine right now, and are either
working from home or staying at home. That's where you waited out there.
Right. So we have also stepped up our work at home program. So any employees that we've identified that have the ability to work from home, we're also doing that over the next 2 weeks, with the hope that the governor will loosen up some restrictions, and then we plan on bringing those folks back to work.
Probably Monday, May 4th is where you cut out again.
Yeah, probably Monday, May 4th. So that's where we're at with regards to that. We're still operating transit service, although we're not getting many riders there. But for those that really need it, we're able to maintain social distancing. So as far as the rest of our
facilities, it's where you broke up again.
As far as the rest of our facilities, particularly with regards to parks, we're still maintaining the same posture that we have been since the governor's recommendations came out. So that's where we stand right now. In terms of cases, and the chief can chime in if he's on, we're at, I think, 30 cases right now, though that's not on the site. I'm pleased to report that the county is now reporting people that are now out of isolation, and that number was 8 as of earlier today. So we're really looking at a situation where there's 20 to 22 cases, active cases in Cochise County right now. So the actual case load is not really a big problem. So I'm hoping the governor will take a look at us on a county by county basis and determine, which counties can proceed with starting to open things up. If that happens, then we will act accordingly.
Okay, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Chuck is correct. I actually just pulled up the website now. It does show 30 cases with 9 that have been released from isolation. So 21 active cases as of this afternoon. They have completed 607 tests in the county. So that's where the county sits right now. There's not much update considering what the governor's order as is. We're just continuing to monitor the number of cases and how it's affecting the city.
Okay, Mr. Fire Chief.
Thank you, Mayor Mueller, members of council. We are hanging steady. We have a bunch of really innovative men and women working for us who have really found ways to ration our PPE the best we can, and it's probably going to cause us to have some operational changes just from operating on a daily basis. So we have seen some good out of this, but our guys and gals are hanging tough. Thank you, sir.
Well, I want to thank you again, and the police chief and the force too. Please give our thanks to the folks out there on a day-to-day basis that are involved in the public. You're doing a great job. And I think I speak for the whole council on saying we're glad you're with us and glad you're protecting us. And just a big thanks. I'd tell you to give them a hug, but I think I'd be in trouble if I did that.
Public Works too. Yeah.
Public Works too as well, because Public Works is out there still doing their thing. And really it's also the employees are acting exceptional in this situation. So thanks to everybody. Chuck, any closing comments? We're good. We're good. Anybody got anything that they have to share? Yes, ma'am. Sarah, thank you.
This is my last thing, I swear. Tomorrow is Administrative Professionals Day. And so I just want to say happy Administrative Professionals Day to our city staff who take really good care of us, especially, Yvette, Jennifer out there who take really good care of us, Jill. So happy Administrative Professionals Day.
Thanks, Sarah. That's good. Thank you.
Good. And normally Chuck takes them all out to lunch. I don't think that's going to happen, but I know he'll tell them thank you very much as well. So anything else before the council before we so hopefully we'll see everybody's smiling face at least on Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Good.
See you then.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Send a picture.